Hi everyone, I'm Sally Wilson. I'm a trauma buster and performance empowerer for high achievers. And I have with me the extraordinary Judith Richards, creator and founder of the Richards Trauma Process. So welcome once again, Jude.
It's always lovely, Sal.
It always is.
It always is.
And we have something really important to talk about today. And it's what adults experience, adults who've been the victims of childhood sexual abuse. So can you lead us through some of the things that people who've experienced childhood sexual abuse tend to live with as adults, Jude?
It's a biggie, Sal. And generally the abuse is done by somebody known to us. I mean, that's the norm. A family member or an authority figure, a teacher, someone in the church who has authority.
Yep.
And it's such an abuse of that trust in an innocent, and the grooming that goes on, gift giving. I was talking to a woman the other day, and as a child, this man gave her a horse. That's how it started. And other gifts. And you're so special. You're so special. And I love you so much, and we have such a special bond. And it's just gradually, bit by bit, this terrible grooming. And the adult knows exactly what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing.
Yep.
And it's a pattern that it's like they all go to pedophile school, because it's a pattern that they all do. And it's very rare for them to just get one child. They'll have many victims. And what does that child grow up with? The biggest one is shame. And this is why it takes an average of about 30 years for someone to come forward about childhood sex abuse, because of the shame. Because somehow we think it was our fault. And some people are told, some children are told, it's your fault. You're just so beautiful and you lead me on.
And there are other people who, as children, are threatened if they tell anyone, or
I'll kill your horse.
Yep. So
and your father will probably want to kill me, and he'll go to jail forever.
Yeah.
And it will be all your fault.
Yeah.
And if a child does attempt to tell somebody, it's so important that we listen, that we believe this little person. In my own experience, it was, what did you do to that good man of God to make him do that, to behave in that manner? What did you do to him? And then, another abuser later in life, what did you do to him? Such a nice man, to make him do that.
Yep. And my experience, and I was very fortunate because I escaped by the skin of my teeth. But when I raised a red flag as a teenager, and in this case, the abuser was the school doctor.
Oh,
and I raised
what a position of power.
Absolutely. And when I raised the red flag, the response, not by my family, but the response by the other people at the school was, oh, you know what teenage girls are like. So if, as Judith says, if someone comes and has the courage to raise a flag, we must listen.
We must listen. We must listen. And when someone exhibits an addiction to substance or behavior, so, drugs, alcohol, behavior, gambling, sex addiction, porn, the thing to do is not to, be punitive, but what happened to you?
Yep.
What happened to you? I know there's a lovely man, Matt Nettleton. People can Google Matt. Matt's a graduate of TRTP, and he failed rehab 17 times. He was on the streets as an ice addict at 13. No one ever asked him what happened. There was no mention. It was all just the physiology and no, trauma, the stats on addiction and childhood trauma, they just go together like that. So what happened, and what people grow up with from sexual abuse in particular, is that shame, the self-blame, it was my fault, and the guilt. And in our little person's psyche, it's like we're so generous that we take on that belongs to the predator.
Yeah.
They're the ones to blame.
Yeah.
They're the ones who should be ashamed. They're the ones who should be guilty, who are guilty. They may not feel guilty. And so this shame and self-blame and guilt is what stands between us and disclosure.
Yeah. And as you said, Jude, it often turns around into a kind of self-abuse, abuse of self.
Thanks, Sal.
Yeah.
There is always rage when there's always anger when there is injustice, and that is the greatest injustice, to take childhood from a child. And that anger, we aren't able as a tiny person to do anything with it. We can't send it where it needs to go, to the perpetrator. And often a child doesn't disclose. And so what happens, that anger has to go somewhere. It's energy in motion. It's emotion. It's energy. It can't just disappear. It can change form. So what does it do? Instead of going outwards to where it should go, it comes back, and it manifests within us as anxiety, depression, PTSD, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia. I'm not saying that everyone with those conditions has had childhood sexual abuse, but I'm just saying these are some of the things, or more extreme physical illness, more serious physical illness, and of course addiction. Yeah.
And on the less severe kind of manifestation of the symptoms, it can be just the sense that everything is my fault. Everything's my fault.
Yeah.
Everything goes wrong.
You get kids self-harming. I'm not saying that all kids that self-harm have been through sexual abuse, but it becomes this self-abuse, overeating, obesity. You know, there's often two reasons for obesity, and that is to become as unattractive as possible or to throw our weight around. I mean, think Clive Palmer, just saying. But it will manifest as something destructive. So, and if you have been through childhood sex abuse and you're living with that shame and the guilt and the self-blame, and you know, we have pleasure zones, God-given. We're supposed to have pleasure when we're doing anything sexual. And so the little child thinks they're a terrible, terrible person if they have any pleasure. Not that everyone does, obviously, you know, but that's another thing. But if you've been through childhood sexual abuse, you can be liberated from it absolutely and completely, and it's available.
And you don't have to talk about it. You don't have to relive it. You don't have to re-experience it. That is not necessary. In fact, it's counterproductive. It can be resolved without revisiting the dreadfulness. And it can be resolved really quite quickly, contrary to what a lot of...
Without more trauma.
Yeah.
Without being re-traumatized. Yeah, so TRTP does that, the Richards trauma process.
Yeah.
So if you're in pain, find a TRTP practitioner and they will take you by the hand to the other side of your pain, to the other side of your shame and guilt and self-blame, and you'll be free.
Yeah. Thank you, Jude.
Thanks, Sal.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
To tuning in next time.
Bye.